I just turn on my volume. Can Alistair say something so I know if I'm hearing everybody? Speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, good. Okay. I had it off on the floor and I forgot to turn it back on. All right, are we live? Yep, we are. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the meeting of the K-12 Education Subcommittee of Ways and Means. We'll be taking up two bills today, House Bill 627 and House Bill 1582. We'll do 627 first. This bill is brought to us in a pretty different form. It's pretty heavily amended. With any luck, you guys have seen the amendments. We worked on them into the evening last evening. Alistair, thank you for your time on that. Really valuable to have you working on this with us. General thrust of the bill now, as amended, will be that there'll be a commission that will be formed. It will be made up of experts in several fields across them. I can read them to you real quickly: African American, Asian American, Pacific Islander, Hispanic and Latino, culture of Maryland's indigenous population, history and contribution of immigrants, Jewish American history, LGBTQ plus American history, Muslim history, and the history and contributions of women. There'll be experts on this committee from each of those. Also, the caucuses there are 7 caucuses in the House of Delegates, and each of them, well, in the legislature, I should say, and each of them will also nominate, they'll be recommended to the General Assembly, 7 members. We'll have 2 licensed teachers and 2 students who are currently enrolled in public high school, and 3 reps from post-secondary education, including university system, community colleges, and HBCU. We'll also have somebody from the Professional Standards Teaching Board, and I think we're just going to say generally the commission should reflect the proportions of minorities and these groups in the state. It's going to be difficult because a lot of groups, but it says to the extent practicable. And then the commission, here's their charge. They're going to study curriculum standards, syllabi, and how they represent history and culture of all Marylanders, including there's a whole bunch of inclusions, and then they're also going to study current school calendars and required hours of instruction and whether they're designed to reflect traditions and customs of all members and calendars. If you're wondering why it says calendars, the thrust there is that days that are offered as holidays are a significant part of that. And then it says they'll determine, then they can make recommendations to the State Board of really to the State Department of Education about courses, about things that should be in courses, or if there are courses that should be created. That'd be up to the State Department. The State Department does take those actions. We ask them to seriously consider, and that's not the term of art, but to seriously consider offering PD, that toward recertification, but PD for teachers who want it. It also says that, I think that's it. I don't, what's in section 2, Alistair? I didn't read it. I don't know what the uncodified section is there under 2.
Sorry, struggling to unmute myself. The uncodified section just had, so the commission is required to do reports every 4 years, but they're required to do a report at the end of their first 4 years to see whether their work has been entirely completed and whether they should continue as a commission.
So they can make a recommendation to us, like, do we need to get rid of this commission? Are we done? Or do they have more work to do? And they'll self-report on that to us. I think that covers most of it. Alistair, did you have any details that you wanted to add in for me?
No, I think you nailed it, sir.
Okay.
Move the amendments.
Thank you. I got a motion. Do I have a second on the amendment?
Second.
Is there any discussion on the amendments? And the amendments are the bill, but we'll do this properly. Okay, seeing none, I will take a vote on the amendments. All in favor of the amendments as described and put before you, raise your hands, please. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 in favor and against. 1. Hornberg, I didn't. Okay, and 2. So we're 4-2. We'll carry those amendments, and now on the bill is amended.
Move the bill.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion on the bill as amended? Okay, hearing none, I'll take a vote. All in favor of the bill as amended, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, and those opposing will be Delegate Hornberger and Delegate Miller, 4-2. Okay, we'll bring that. I think this bill is on the voting list today. Is that correct, Alistair? Okay. The next bill is House Bill 1582, often referred to as the Compass Act. This is a restructuring and a reconsideration of parts of the way that school evaluations are done across the state. it really changes a lot of weights of things. I don't know, we didn't send out this document, did we? We didn't have this to send out. So I'm going to ask John if he can post it so you can see where they will be. There are two major categories when we do this. One is academic, and the other is, I call it school climate or school conditions. They refer to it sometimes as non-academic. Up to this point, non-academics could only be academics could only be a maximum of 65% of it. Academic is often based on testing, but not absolutely based on testing. The other 30% were a number of other things that are actually listed in the original bill, which are possibility ones: class size, caseload, opportunities for advanced placement, career technology, and dual enrollment. That's one. Down on discipline, but two that were added to the bill, and there's a general agreement between the governor's office and legislature and MSDE and MSEA on this, to add these two: completion of staffing measures, which has to do with credentialed. It had more there, but we decided to say school staffing measures, looking at who's credentialed, that sort of thing. And then also completion of a well-rounded curriculum. Before, it was if there was a well-rounded curriculum available, and that was like everybody gets a trophy because everybody had a well-rounded curriculum. They all put them in. We want to see how many students are actually completing this well-rounded curriculum. They are only allowed to have three school ones. I got to get the right word for it because it's not in their document, but ones that have to do with school climate or school. Alistair, give me the word. I've lost
School
the
quality indicators.
quality indicators. Thank you. They can only have three of this list, and the bill says that none can be less than 10%. So doing a little quick math, you can see that they will pick three, and they'll each be 10%. And that's on the document at the bottom if you're looking at the document with me. And by the way, I'll be happy to share this with you guys. MSE said, go ahead and post this. They gave it to me. They asked me to stress that this is not absolute. It's not in the bill, but that this is their intent. They have to go before the board with this. And then above, you'll see things. The only one that's a little confusing is the 25% for academic progress is 15 for high school, but then that pick up the 10 in looking at how many ninth graders are on track. Okay. Other than that, the weights are the same for academic achievement, academic progress, which is a year-over-year measure, not of students in third grade, and then the same grade next year. It's the same group of students to follow if they're making academic progress. I think that describes it. You can look at this briefly and have a peek. Like I said, this is proposed. It says it in bright blue letters at the top, but I think this is what they would like to do. We had some amendments, and I'll describe them real briefly. The only one was, I think the only one of significance, Alistair, is us taking out the rest of the description of school staffing measures, and also kind of the dates and reporting a little bit in the uncodified section. I will add that the uncodified section says that since there are a number of ones that could be on school quality indicators, and they're only going to be able to choose three, the report says that on any ones they don't use, they have to make a report to State Department of Education, board, and us about how those are going. Even though they might not be using them for evaluation, we would like to know chronic absenteeism, things that are of some importance to us. Alistair, anything to add?
Sorry, trying to mute myself again.
You are not good at that today. You're a
No,
little
it's
slippery
a
on the finger
struggle.
there, my friend.
It's a struggle. I just wanted to just give a little bit more detail on the reporting requirement that is being
Yes.
added in the amendment. It's
Thank you, because some of that was, we were working on some of that. Thank you. Go ahead.
yeah, it's a reporting requirement by the State Department of Ed to the State Board of Ed and the General Assembly on both the school quality indicators that are not used and whether the composite score and each element that's used to make up the composite score, each indicator, is tracking with poverty over the last several years. So to get a sense of, are we just measuring if a school is a poor school, or are we measuring, more importantly, actual things going on in that
And I think
school?
there was some thought that some of these school quality indicators do tend to correlate with poverty a bit. And so that's relevant. Thank you. Anything else?
That's it.
Okay, I got Delegate Hornberger with his hand raised. Sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm just, thinking back on the testimony on the bill, there was a lot of talk about how great the bill was. There wasn't really talk about the numerical analysis. So I appreciate this chart a lot. That's incredibly helpful. And if you could email it to us.
Yes. And
My
I
question-
want to tell you the State Department, I didn't have to make this up. I mean, they said, yeah,
Yeah.
we'll tell you what we want to do. So they've been very open with us. It is a hallmark of the leadership in the State Department now that it's easier to get information from them about what they want to do than it had been in the past.
And we're not going to legislate this chart, obviously. We're just going to set some parameters. So that's what deals with my question here.
Okay.
And I'll try to use an anecdote to clarify this. So this enacts a different rubric for grading individual schools, right? So my question is, we'll just use my jurisdiction of Cecil County. And I have 5 high schools, for example, or whatever jurisdiction might have more or less. So I'm grading these different high schools. Does this rubric that's proposed allow for me to move the levers within what each one of these subcategories differently for different schools?
And I'm going to say no, but I'm going to ask Laurel Kratzley from MSDE
Okay.
to make sure I get the correct answer on that. Laurel, can you weigh in on that, please?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I also have Tim Guy with me, who is the Assistant State Superintendent of Accountability.
Sorry, Tim, I didn't find your name on my list. With the document up, there's a limited group of names over here. So thank you. If he wants to weigh in, that'd be fine
Yes.
also.
Awesome.
So I'm Tim Guy, Assistant State Superintendent of Assessment and Accountability at MSDE. The purpose of the system under federal guidelines is to provide consistency across the schools. So the measures, of course, the actual data that is compiled at each school is different, but the consistency of the overall system that schools are measured on has to be in place across those schools.
Okay, so let's take this a little bit farther. Would a school in Cecil County be graded the same way as a high school in Wicomico County?
Yes. So the across the state, the system would be the same. Occasionally, there will be measures that are not available, like something like EL proficiency or ML proficiency, because a school may have an insufficient number of students to actually contribute to certain pockets of the system. But
Sure.
Overall, the intention is that the system would be consistent across the state.
Okay. And then that's very helpful. Thank you. My second question is, overwhelmingly, these are what I'll call internal measurements. So these are measurements that local boards are doing or state boards have set. There's a federal nexus here too, which is this federal standardized testing, which are sort of outside of the state. So is that a data point or in any way measured in these ratings? What I'll refer to as like an external factor, an external in the sense of that it's outside of Maryland.
So the states develop their own, under the Every Student Succeeds Act, we develop our own state plan with federal guidelines. And part of the federal guidelines is still the consistency of 3 through 8 testing in English language arts and mathematics and science, and then once in high school as well. So those are incorporated into the measures here. So the academic achievement indicator is primarily made up of that standardized testing component.
Okay.
And so that is required to be part of our overall accountability system to ensure that we are measuring academic achievement and reporting that out, and that you can look between states and have a general idea of how those proficiencies are coming out.
Okay. And then my last question, thank you, you've been very helpful. There was some concern, and I get it, that, under the current regime, we have schools that are 1 star, for example, and there could be stigma associated with that. Because you've already laid out the rubric here, and I don't know if you've done any modeling, will there still be schools that are labeled, whether deserved or not, what I'll call the equivalent of the 1 star or the bottom tier? How are we proving that we're doing improvements, but at the same time not demonizing schools with what I'll call the 1 star, or whatever the equivalent will be with this new rubric?
So the new rubric is definitely a draft and work in progress. So the first step in this was the legislative changes to allow us to make some of the committee recommendations come to life. And so our secondary part of this work is now to, once we have legislative changes approved, to then take that back and work within the parameters that the committee and task force that we worked with provided us, and then to propose to bring those back to do what would be considered like a standard setting for like figuring out like how many schools are fitting into these different categories, what are good and bad values for the different indicators, and kind of getting into the nitty gritty of how all that fits together to then put forward the final accountability system to our overall board. So that is the secondary part of this work, is to get this back to the committee and to be able to model this out within each indicator in and of itself, and then the overall then impact on how ratings are done. We've had a lot of conversations with different partners in the committees around like what rating systems mean, and every state does it a little bit differently. And so we have some options, and none of that is finalized. But we do have, we have to have some level of overall school performance rolled up, but how we then display that and think about how that might be envisioned for the final system is really the work that would go forward after this bill is finalized.
Okay, and last question, I promise. So based on the regime that you laid out in the bill testimony, if I was a 1-star school today with the old system, however, I showed considerable improvement with this new system, that might move my ranking in this new one up to a much higher level because I'm showcasing improvement at a greater level. Is that an accurate statement?
So we're going to enhance the usage of growth within this new system. How that plays out, depending, like we're going to have a focus on the lowest 33%. Or the lowest third of students in academic performance. We do have that as one of our requirements, and moving forward, we want to put that forward in the system.
Okay. I'm going to interrupt here a little bit. Okay. We're drilling down a lot of detail about what you intend to do next.
Yeah, sure.
And none of that is really in the legislation.
Great.
I think it's a good conversation. And actually, I would welcome the conversation if we could maybe convene.
Well, I mean, that was part of the testimony. That's why I was.
Yeah. Thank you. Finish your answer though, Tim. I want to point out that that this is not generic to the content of the bill right now. It's generic to what you're going to do next for certain. And they're good questions, Delegate Hornberger. Trust me.
Yeah, and the way that is focused in the legislation is opening up a larger space for academic indicators, which would have the growth in it. And so like we have that as the legislative part of this is really opening up those percentages and then moving items out of there so that we actually have the space to incentivize growth further. How that plays out in the final system and how that might change star ratings is back to that additional work that has to be done on each indicator and then the eventual roll up to an overall rating for a school or an overall score for a school.
Okay, thank you. I'll defer to my colleague for the other questions.
Thank you very much. Delegate Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, to kind of follow up on some of what Delegate Hornberger was saying. So when you were saying, I'm back to the quality indicators and only picking 3, because ideally the whole goal of this is to change how the results are displayed. Is that right? With the new compass?
I'm still going to let Tim or Laurel weigh in on that. If it's okay with you guys.
So it's not only the display of final results, but it's also developing understanding of each indicator and making sure that indicators are actionable at the school level. So the current system has an abundance of indicators that we're trying to reduce down to ensure that we're focused in and that the usage of things like growth are better understood by schools and school systems to ensure that is actually happening at the school level. And then the other items here is that we're trying to reduce some of our items that are highly correlated to poverty and to look at that data set as we're making final decisions. And some of the parameters in the current legislation without these changes are kind of forcing us to use an abundance of indicators in SQS set, the school quality part, for instance, as well as having like a reduced emphasis on academic indicators. So we want to make sure that the new system has just slight changes to then allow for the overall system to be updated across the indicators, as well as then the final school ratings, which we haven't finalized any of that. It's really just providing the options and the space for us to do that work.
Thank you. And what this bill, one of the major changes in this bill was the amount of percentage that can go to academic indicators as opposed to school quality. We upped that, and most of them, not all, and I have to be careful here, but most of them are test-based. And so what we've actually done is increase the significance that can be attributed to testing results in this case. But we didn't want to have parts of them, because there are so many that could be in that 30%. We didn't want any of them to be so small that they weren't significant as the other elements. So that's why the 10%. We want them to hold their own. We want MSDE to pick 3 that they think are really worthwhile and should be held equally with the testing that is occurring, mostly testing, that is occurring on the other side here. And so the others still exist, and the others are still important, and there will still be reporting on them. They will not be used, they will potentially not be used for part of that evaluation.
And then,
Move the
and
amendments.
that's where I still have the disconnect is where, because you just said MSDE picks. Is it MSDE picking? Is it the local school systems picking?
No, it's State Department. It's the
As
State Department.
far,
This is their rating system, and we want the rating system to measure schools equally against each or with each other. And so the State Department will pick which of those 3 that they're going to use. And it's pretty clear, since they asked for 2 of them as an amendment, that they will be using, I suspect they'll use those 2, and law requires them to use the survey as the 3rd one.
so the individual schools aren't picking the quality indicators, then how
No.
are,
Asked and answered. The State Department is going to pick 3 of these, okay? And I have indicated, it's my opinion, I can tell you which 3 they're probably going to choose to rate that 30% of school quality here.
okay, and then the other piece, I still have an issue with the school staffing measures part of that. And I do
Mhm.
appreciate all the time that you all took. I understand a lot better as far as the growth and the growth indicators, and I'm appreciative of that part.
So, wait a minute, Doug, I'm looking at time
Yeah.
here. Are you having a problem with dual staffing measures being placed in there as a possibility, as a choice? Or is your problem with them possibly using that one if we put it in?
My problem is the school staffing members being used as a choice because it's
Ah.
actually prescribed in Blueprint, so it's really not a choice.
Well, it's in Blueprint, but it's not part of this evaluation that's occurring. So it's being echoed here, I believe. And like I said, they don't have to choose it. You can get on the phone with the folks that we're looking at here and tell them, don't use that one if you want to, okay? This bill does not require them to use school staffing measures. They're there, and obviously they've been added because there's interest, but
It could also, I think our amendments are separating it a little, if I may, Mr. Chair, sorry to jump in
sure,
here.
please, no, step in.
I think our amendments are changing a little bit and making it a little bit different than the blueprint. So rather than focused
Thank
on
you.
national board certification,
Yeah.
it's leaving it up to MSDE to pick a school staffing indicator. I think they might do something like how many teachers are retained from year to year, or how many teachers are fully licensed and
Fully
teaching
credentialed, yeah.
yeah,
And
teaching the
and
field they're
They
licensed in.
indicated that interest, but they wouldn't have to. They could use NBC. So this is something for us. These are offline conversations for us to
Right,
have.
but even retention speaks to the Blueprint with minimal school funding. But yeah,
Right.
so anyway, those are just the issues that I still have.
Thank you.
Can I move
Delegate
the
Vogel?
amendments?
Thank you. I got a motion on the amendments. Do I have a second? He said pregnantly pausing. Who do we?
Second.
Okay, thank you. I have a second. Can you go ahead and take the document down so I can see people on screen? All right, it's properly moved and seconded. We've had a lot of discussion on the amendments. I'll allow for more if we need it. Seeing none, all in favor of the amendments to the bill, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Against the amendments to the bill, Delegate Hornberger and Delegate Miller. Thank you. Okay, on the bill as amended.
Move favorable.
Move favorable. Do I have a
Second.
second? I have a second. Properly
Second.
moved and seconded. Thank you all. Is there any further discussion on the bill as amended? Okay, hearing none, all in favor of the bill as amended, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And those opposed. 1, 2. Okay, 5-2. And the measure carries. Head down to Ways and Means. They wanted to vote at noon, and we held them up a little, but it was important discussion. And thank you. And Delegate Miller, Delegate Hornberger, let's talk offline about this. I need to hear more of your.
Yeah, just
thoughts on
explaining my vote. These amendments just make it a little bit more nebulous than I had originally thought. So
I understand. Yeah,
offline. Thank you.
thank you for that. All right, we're adjourned. Thank